You've been following along with all the previous videos, you've set up your project like this, and now you get to have some fun and animate it. Well, you should have been having fun all the time, but let's have some more fun. So I don't want to get into every single keyframe, but I do want to point out some of the little things here and there that'll make animation much easier. Let's zoom in here a bit and preview this section where we have the mesh, which is this, over the background logo, which is this, and the animation, the distortion of the mesh has been done already, but let's look at something that I've done here, previewing our merge 3D so we could see 3D space. We've got this light here, our point light, and you can see we've got a keyframe on the intensity. So it starts out with the intensity of 0, and as the animation plays, the intensity goes up. So this is kind of a transitioning on, and then the intensity is 2 here. We got the full lighting effect, which you could also do if you want to animate the light. You can get some interesting dynamic effects. I just left it in one position, but it definitely could be interesting to move it around. All right, coming back to our merge here, let's press 2 to preview that. The background, really no animation to this logo that's behind our mesh. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room to see here and take a look at our photo. Click on its transform, press 2 to preview that. Okay, so here's how that's animating in. And if we want to check at a glance what has keyframes on it, I could see that the transform has a little keyframe icon here, and the background has a keyframe icon here. Everything else is just static, so those are the only 2 things I got to worry about. And the transform, that's nothing to really worry about. It's just a size keyframe. But let's take a look at this background and see what that's doing. I'm going to press 1 to preview that on the left. So in this background node, I want to first click on this image tab here. And I found out after the fact that I didn't do this the most intuitive way, but this is how I got it to work. So I animated the height of this layer, and you can see on the left, it starts out as just a 1 pixel layer. Actually, maybe it's a 2 pixel layer. And then it expands out. And as it gets to be a thicker line, we have this transition here, and you can see the lines aren't completely filled in, but you know, that's how I wanted it to be. So the problem was that I couldn't squeeze this all the way down to a 0 height. So to compensate for that, what I did is I went to the color tab and I adjusted the transparency here, the alpha, so that in the very beginning, when we got this 1 or 2 pixel line, something like this, if I had the alpha up, instead of seeing a very thin line, and I'm going to click on these 3 little dots here and uncheck the checker underlay so you could see this a little bit more clearly. All right, so here it's fading in. We got that smoothing the transition. And now let's look at this photo left. So I'm going to click it, press 2. Actually, I'm going to click on the merge, press 2 so we could see things more clearly. Okay, nothing too special in here. We could see there's a transform and there's this background. So the background, we could see our keyframes are coming from here to here. And as the player is coming in, we are basically animating our overlaying gradient. And so we see we're animating the Y over here. And if we move that, you could see we get a transition basically really nice just by moving this in one direction or another. And the transform, it's just moving from left to right. But I do want to talk about that for a second in the spline editor. And I want to make sure I got this node selected. And if you look in here, there's many things that have been animated. And this makes life a little bit complicated to try and find just what you're looking for. So I don't prefer this view. What I do prefer is clicking on these 3 little dots here and clicking on Show Only Selected Tool. So I want to make sure that this is selected and I could see it by clicking this checkbox if it's not already checked on, clicking on this button here to frame up, and I'll give myself a little bit more room here to see. So while this might not look like anything too interesting, it's just this line here curving upward, and we've got handles, and it almost looks flat, but if you look closely, hopefully you could see that it's not exactly flat. And what that's doing is we've got this moving from left to right, and then we've got it continually just slightly moving, so this image on the left never gets stuck in place. It moves in fast, and then after it gets into position, it keeps very slowly moving to the right. And there's a really cool way to do this. What you do is right click on this, and then after right click on that keyframe, go to gradient extrapolation. If I turn this off, you'll see now this line actually gets flattened out because it's not doing anything after this keyframe. There's no keyframes after that. But if I right click on this again and turn on gradient extrapolation, now I rotate this exactly how I want it. And after this, it smoothly keeps moving this at a constant speed. So it keeps it moving and there's no harsh break. There's a tangent line, so our transition keeps smooth and it's always moving. So that's a really nice touch. Okay, so for the particles, we did all the particle animation in the video that talked about creating particles, so we could skip that. For the number underlay, there's nothing too complicated here. We can see there is animation on this polygon. It's really just moving the mask upward. The number here was animated in a way very similar to the center image, but in a much more intuitive way, because what I did is I added a transform and just animated the transform here, the size Y over time to make it thicker, and that was a much more efficient approach. The photo on the right obviously was animated the same way as the photo on the left, so nothing too complicated there. And then we got the name text. I just went into the layout and I animated the size, and I animated the background element a little bit too. If you click the shading tab and extend vertical, so I used this underlay and I just animated this part of it. So you combine all that together and you fool around with the spline editor to get your timing and your ease in and ease out, and that's pretty much it. And you got some NBA style motion design.